Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Gaëtan Verna, and I'm the director of the Power Plant. I would like to welcome you to the Power Plant's International Lecture Series and this special presentation by pioneering, Barcelona-born, New York-based conceptual artist Antoni Muntadas. Incidentally, Antoni Muntadas had in the past a solo exhibition curated by Hior Holubisky, presented at the Power Plant in 1988. So we are very, very pleased to welcome him back as part of our 25th anniversary festivities. This lecture is just one of the many events celebrating our 25th anniversary, many of which are based around our dynamic archival project, Dissenting Histories, 25 years of the Power Plant, on view in our upstairs gallery until August 26. Did you know that this series of lectures first started as a monthly Sunday afternoon series of independent lectures that ran first from November 1989 to April 1990 and included guests such as Yves-Alain Bois, Douglas Crimp, and Griselda Pollock? The International Lecture Series has since become a vital long-running program of the Power Plant, which sees the most dynamic artists, curators, critics, and others from around the globe present their work to the Toronto audiences. All of our International Lecture Series talks are free to members and their guests. So I encourage you to become a member of the Power Plant and to take advantage of this year's series, which includes on Wednesday, May 23rd, a lecture by Jens Hoffman, director of the California College of Arts Wattis Institute, as well as a lecture by artists Omer Fass, Douglas Copeland, Sarah Morris, and others presented later on this year. The Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery at Harbourfront Centre is indebted to our major supporters, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Toronto Arts Council. During this special anniversary year, we acknowledge the support of the Al Jackman Foundation, the Ontario Cultural Attraction Fund, our media partner Now Magazine, our official travel sponsor Porter Airlines, and the Power Kids sponsor Bank of Montreal Financial Group. Our 2012 International Lecture Series donor is the G.P. Bickle Foundation. We would like to thank them all for their financial support that enables our nonprofit gallery to always present the best in contemporary arts to our diverse audiences. Now, please welcome the Power Plant's curator, Melanie O'Brien, who will introduce our guest tonight, Mr. Antoni Muntadas. Thank you.
Hi, it's a great pleasure to welcome Antoni Muntadas back to Toronto in the context of our 25th anniversary. And I think most of you are very familiar with his practice, but for those of you that aren't, working in photography, video, installation, as well as undertaking urban interventions, publications, and web projects, Muntadas addresses social and political issues such as the relationship between public and private space, the ways information channels are used to censor or promulgate ideas. He has a long-standing history of showing in Canada and in Toronto, as Gaëtan said. And I would also like to mention that his work Alpha Veli Otros is showing at V-Tape until May 19th. Muntadas was born in Barcelona and has lived in New York for the last 40-odd years. He is currently visiting professor at the MIT program in Art, Culture, and Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and at the Instituto Universitario di Arquitectura del Veneto, Venice. His work has been exhibited extensively around the world in solo and group exhibitions, including the recent traveling retrospective Entre, Between, that opened at the Museo Reina Sofía in Madrid and is traveling to Porto, Paris, and Vancouver, I believe. So this handsome catalog is available at the Power Plant, and outside of the theater doors, ArtMet has an amazing table of past artist projects and editions of Muntadas's, so please spend some time looking at those great projects. Muntadas will take some questions at the end of the talk, and we would like to very much welcome him here tonight, so please come on up, or speak from there.
Okay, I need to say that, 25 years it was the show where I showed the boardroom I will talk about. And I feel like for this presentation, I feel to start not very early. I think we'll say in the late 70s, where I start to work with the concept of media landscape. The media landscape as a concept, that in a way, of course, it has relationship with McLuhan ideas, a lot of film and other video artists connected at that time with the idea of the media. But I decided to call media landscape to try to see then the programs on television and radio, and the print, it was bringing another kind of universe and another kind of situation that never is real too, but to see as a kind of metaphorical as a landscape. That originated a series of works that moved from near a decade. And the concept for me is still on, but I think the work is evolving. I think the evolving in the way that I've been enlarging from a micro situation to much more macro situation where incorporated more social and political issues. At that time, the work confrontations, it was at the moment of 73, 74, and it was where television, in this case, it was very much in relationship with the Vietnam War, and I think it was the Nixon situation, it was an important element of analysis, how all the different channels it was analyzing and was treating the information. All that, it was a period that I was thinking in terms of objectivity, how the media could be objective, how we could see a kind of reality that through the media that we could get informed, but also that we could have some conclusions from that from an objective point of view. Obviously, that situation it was also extended with works that it was analyzing the end of television, the last 10 minutes of television. I think this work at this moment, it will not make sense because television, you have 24 hours. At that time, the sign of television, it was a moment special where you can, it was a moment where a lot of propaganda, religion, national anthems, a lot of moment where people are in a kind of unconscious way, before to go to sleep, it was a very subtle moment where a lot of information and propaganda was disseminated. That work, it has two variations with Argentina, Brazil, United States, and then after one on United States, Russia, and Germany in Kassel. This search for objectivity arrived to a conclusion that through a work, or a series of work, and that it was the moment where I started to work in MIT, and I started to work with the possibility to do a series of interdisciplinary works. On subjectivity, it was a videotape and a book. And a book originated by Photograph of Life magazine. The Best of Life, it was a recollections of photographs of life, the best of life, supposedly. And I selected 50, and I duplicated 5 each of these photographs, and sent to different parts of the world, different people asking for a caption. The result, it was a kind of anthropological room of image, where it has the sense of a museum of anthropology, but it was devoted to the image, and not only the image, but the interpretation of this image. The 50 photographs, it was presented also with the process of the work. I think I need to say that, and I need to also emphasize that that period it was mail art, medium that people use. And obviously now it will be a similar project with internet. It will be another different way. It will go faster. That it was take me maybe a year and a half. All the process of inviting the people, receiving the information. And the caption, it was, all the caption, it was put together in a book that in a way was a statement about accepting subjectivity. And the photographs of life confronted with the 5 lectures or readings of the caption, exactly like I was receiving, like facsimiles on the language and the handwriting of the situation. That this photograph that obviously I select the 50, and I, in a way, the way how the readings becomes, it was a kind of diversity of understandings or readings of the same image. The book, it has also in the back the series of people that contribute and the names of the photographers that they do these photographs, and actually the captions, what we could see the true from the views and the eyes of the Life magazine. In the way how it was presented, I mentioned before, a series of vitrines, and then the projection of the book page by page, and then the videotape. Then it was a similar strategy about television, how television, through the eyes of different people I interview, interpreted the way how the filter of television in terms of, again, subjectivity, objectivity. This project, in a way, I make a big jump on time. I was continuing in media projects, but in 1999 I started to be interested in the issues of three-dimensional space and architecture. And I started a series of works that I call media architecture installation. It was putting after together a DVD and Marie Duguay put together. Well, more than a DVD, I call an inter-ROM. It was a DVD-ROM with a project in internet together. Like that, from the DVD, you could jump on a site, and it was connected, the two mediums. Actually, the paradox is that work with the years they become obsolete, because now is technology, and we are looking now to the possibility of everything to put on the net, then with the change of different generations of that, it start to be already a kind of antique. Anyway, then we arrived to the boardroom, then it was the work here. Actually, it was produced in Boston with a grant of the Mass Council for the Arts. It was a couple of years of work. And the work tries to emphasize the relations of religion, economy, and media. Like that, in a way, start for what is a boardroom. We know what a boardroom means, a place of decision-making, institutional, corporate. Normally it's photographs of the presidents of the corporation or institutional portraits. In this case, the portraits is religious leaders, every religious leader representing a cult, and it needs to see the perspective of that from the North America perspective. I would say it was what happened. We could understand that spectrum from United States and Canada. The people you could recognize, Oral Roberts, some Snilson, the Pope, Khomeini, many of the Maharaji, the people that was involved with. Each one has its relationship with the media. We have the program on television, or they have its own, for example, Schuller in Los Angeles for the Crystal Cathedral is the first cathedral broadcast. It has cameras, they broadcast totally from every Sunday morning from like that. Everyone at that moment, it was really perceptive for the way how he could use the media. The project implicates also the metaphor of the Last Supper with obviously the religious reference. I would say that each one of the personalities, it has a monitor in the mouth with their own discourses and speeches. It was a couple of years of research and looking for archives and looking at material. At this moment, this work is part of the National Gallery in Ottawa, and they've been great in terms of led them to other places. And this is something that sometimes the institution is not so easy. But and also they were very good to help to digitalize the material. I think it's a case of preservation, very interesting. The monitors I was using, it was the $50 monitor buying Canal Street in New York. And really, like, it was a mess every time I need to show. Now we upgrade to digitalize, and, you know, I think it's really like a big change. Anyway, every of these tapes in the mouth, it was emphasized some of the vocabulary, some of the words that it was important in relationship with each of the speeches. Like that, that work, in a way, I feel like one work sometimes brings you to another, but this in here, it was all the connection about certain stereotypes of, or structures of architectural structures. If we see the boardroom is a kind of a model of using a space for an institutional or corporate space, the stadium becomes also, I think with the middle-sized cities, a stadium and museum are two public structures that existed, one for high culture, the other for popular culture. That I decided to investigate the stadium. It was produced in Banff after a couple of residents there and presented at the Walter Phillips Gallery. That it was my first connection with Daina Augaitis to become the curator of the show in Madrid. And Banff was a great place to work because, you know, you have the time, but also it was enough. The library was very good there, and the librarian at the moment, I don't know if it's still the same, but it was very helpful. Like that, it was like 3 months of thinking and researching, and of course this extended for more time. I think all the work, it was 3 years probably to finish. It was a kind of idea to do a kind of maquette, large size, more than just an installation. I think trying to analyze the social aspect or sociological aspect of the stadium in terms of immersing yourself in the stadium with a certain kind of course, reference to architecture, but also with some of the image and text that was producing in relationship with the use of the stadium, not only from sports, but from the multi-use, I will say religion, politics, music, concert, and historical perspective. The sound, it was and is important. In the middle, sound with a projection of the audience, an audience that has captured inside of these columns. The soundtrack is a soundtrack collage from a lot of the soundtracks that I could find in the stadiums. It has a kind of reverberation of the audience as a background. And every time it's presented, I think now it's been 15 times, is recontextualized in the place where it's showing. That when it was in Berlin, emphasized of the 30 Olympics, were the Hitler Olympics. A lot of the imagery come from there. When it was showing in Spain, it was relationship with situation and evidence there. In Latin America, in relationship, for example, Chile used the stadium as a prison. They capture and torture many people there. I think even in South Africa too. Like that, the stadium as a kind of multi-use space where accommodate the spectacle, but also manipulated. Inside this idea of the architectural installations, the forum has to do a kind of, I always say with the work sometimes function as you start the projects by curiosity, by to wanted to know more than to get sometimes thinking and exploring and researching about an issue. And some of these projects, for example, this was take me 10 years. And it was a decision to see in the 80s that the system of art, I always make two differences. The production of art, I think, is the artists and what the artists produce, and the interrelation with the works. I think the system is the people between the artist and the art and the audience. In this case, the work is exploration of the system of art. I was curious because I started to see in the 80s that the system with all the economical implications and certain power of some of the roles start to be a decade, the very characteristic. And I think now we are dealing with the consequences, certain consequences. Between the frames, 8 chapters, and in the way how these dealers, collectors, galleries, museum, dozens, critic, media, and epilogue, it was orchestrated in around an installation where the 8 chapters are located. I would say it's a kind of reverse panopticon. In panopticon, you have in the middle the authority, the police, and the prison around. Here is the audience, and then you have the system. In every of the chapters is the recollection of 150 interviews at that period, keeping all in the same language. The critics, the collectors are each one of the chapters superposed with what I call open visuals. The collectors with the stock market in Japan, the critics, the highways, lowways in California. It has to do also where I was producing the post-production of every of the chapters. This was in San Diego, the previous, it was in Tokyo. One of the chapters I do in Vancouver, at Western Front, where I use the train, with the computer train in Vancouver as a metaphor for the galleries and the dealers. And every of these chapters has to around 1 hour interviews is condensed for a totality of 4 hours and 30 minutes. That is a big process of editing. What is happened now, this work is showing now in the MACBA in Barcelona, and it's shown as an installation, how I show in the forum. But across the street, the MACBA has a center of documentation, like that. In the museum is the installation, and in the center of documentation is the 150 interviews plain, with no touch. For me, it was an important gesture because I think it's a moment where this idea of the archive starts to be a little bit confused, and considering that everything archive is work and that. I feel like the archive is, we work with archives, and I think I make archives, but I think it's important to activate the archive. Like that, to see in the museum the work already edited, finished, activated by me, and the other it was the source material, the 150 interviews, the material that maybe is important I don't use. Like that, I offered to other people who could use it and maybe to do a second interpretation of that system. Then I will say that work is between the frames, 10 years is a lot to talk, but I think I move on. The press conference room is another architecture, the press conference. Of course, most of these works are starting from a structure that we know and is magnified or dramatized in order to create a certain kind of emphasis on the metaphor. In this case, the press conference room imply the idea of actually the lantern, the microphones, the presence behind. In this case, it was an invisible presence, but it could be extended to anyone. He created a certain kind of media carpet going from the lantern to a monitor where a lot of political speeches are edited, and the soundtrack comes from on the top. It starts very understandable, and then it's overlapping until the discourse is totally destroyed. Like that, it's hard to describe these works. I think it's a perceptual aspect than obviously than is missing here in my words. But I will say because the lighting is important and the situation how we created is important. Then we're right to actually an archive, the file room. And I consider part of this media architecture installation because I think an archive or a room where you have files is also something that we associated to libraries or to public libraries, to institutions. In this case, the file room is another metaphorical presentation in terms of installation, but it was interesting that when I produced the work in Chicago, mosaic started to be researched. And I have the possibility to work in Urbana, Illinois, with the people that are developing. And what is supposed to be in the beginning a project about censorship, about cultural censorship based on hypertext, through the possibilities to work with them to develop one of the first projects on internet, and considering that for the censor cases, it was the possibility that the cases are not closed, that people could include new information, or the project becomes a dialogue, an open archive. Also, another thing that was interesting is the installation, it becomes part of the access. At that time in '94, it's not like now that you could go to a cyber cafe, or you have a computer at home, or you could have, universities access. I think it was much more reduced. Like that installation, it becomes two things, access and also metaphor. Metaphor with these file cabinets, than in H1 of the computers, it was also access. It was also an interesting decision, the possibility to do it at the Chicago Cultural Center, that it was the old public library of Chicago. Like that, the architecture itself, it was a kind of repository of many of the memory documents. And Chicago also is a very interesting city. They have the Pace Museum. They have a lot of involvement with social and political issues. Like that, to work there, it was in certain way contextual in order to find people to collaborate. And actually, Gaetan, you remember before that occasionally we meet in Paris, and you were knowing this project, no? You interact a little bit with this project.
I did the research.
Okay. It was divided in geography, history, subjects, and mediums. as you see, I wanted to keep it still now with the same graphic thing. I think everybody say, wow, this is very 90s for the, for internet. I'd say, well, it's important to keep it the same way. It's linked at a certain moment. The work is cases of censorship. And in general, most of them is a possibility to discuss of something that is always very difficult sometimes to define what is censorship and what is not. I think it's all start from a case I have on censorship with the Spanish television. I feel like the project becomes an exorcism for myself and for other people. Again, it was a project that I could talk a lot, but I think I prefer to move on more to recent things now. Consequence of Between the Frames and the file room, I think, is the translation series. The translation series is, well, in a way, is from language to code, from silence technology, subjectivity, objectivity, for agreements to words, private to public, semiology, cryptography. It was a kind of structures of a spectrum of issues that I start to feel like the power of translation, not only from the perspective of language, but perspective of cultural translation. That I start to perceive that these filters of culture, social, economics, many filters that in a way we perceive things, but sometimes we perceive through a translated process. I will go fast for that because it's already generated more than 40 projects since '94. The first it was in Finland on translation the pavilion. The games, it was connected to the Olympics in Atlanta. I feel like the Olympics as an event, it has something like a translated event. It's not only because it's anthems and flags and competitions and countries, but it's because also it has something about simultaneous translation. In this case, I was decided to devote the work to the simultaneous translators, people that are always in a hidden booth, that in very bad conditions, translating. And what people listen in the headphones, it was the translation to English of what the translator originally speak in Vietnamese. And I decided Vietnamese because it's the less represented country in that Olympics. A series of elements around this booth. It was in a kind of activity during the time, the 3 months. That it was a kind of bulletin board, and it was interacting with certain things that people sending and myself collecting. It was 18 bulletin boards related to the idea of translation from a much more open spectrum. That work, I will say, I need to say the On Translation series takes different forms and different resolutions depending of the subject of the work. And in this case, the table that is created with 12 different segments, each one with a different kind of booth and a style, trying to make a wall entity. It accommodates to a series of maps that represent the distribution of wealth through technology, communications, culture, and in a way these maps are translated through the table with these books. They are in a part of the low part of the legs. I think this table is balanced and cut in a different way. The books are, and also the books changing in every place is presented. That is a relationship between maps and books, and how two forms of expression, text and graphic from the maps, are part of a translation process. That work is more like a proposition, and in a way it's a proposition that not personally did, but I just leave it open. Then obviously is the process how banks functioning in terms of making circulating money, but also certain way of disappearing. This was part for a show in a bank in New York, disaffected bank. Then young artists decide to do a show with issues of economical issues, and I decided to do this image. Rarely I work in only one image. Normally it's a series of elements that are part of a series or part of that, but difficult to one's only image. And the translation series also covers certain public works in public space, like the work in Sao Paulo. This work, it was a work produced for Arte Cidade, an event. It happened in Sao Paulo time to time. It's interesting that we live in periods of biennales and triennales, and Arte Cidade decide that they move totally out of the calendar, and they do when they have the possibilities, the energy, and the money to do it. Like that is not typical story of 2 years or 3 years. And I think this is start to be a little bit of characteristic of some events in Latin America, in Colombia too. Los Encuentros de Bogotá is already 2, and there are difference of 5 years, 7 years. And I think it's interesting not necessary to go into this repeating institutionalized cycle, than going a much more organic than one is issues or work or urgencies to talk in a country that maybe, or in a part of the country that not information. I think it could be interesting that event happen. I developed with an architect in Sao Paulo, Sara Montoya, a collaboration with her, a project that it was 11 metal plates, bronze plates, that is dedicated to parts in Sao Paulo where changes on the master plan of the city was abruptly changed by economical or political reasons. Like that, each of these plates, it was located in the place. It was more a plate of celebration. It was more a plate of urban disasters to commemorate things that supposed to be happen, and it created some expectations. And actually, sometimes the money was there, but disappeared, and these projects never occur. That the plates is about an emptiness or silence of projects that it was supposed to be happening, is the name of the governor or the mayor, and the place where it's located is the place where the plate is. These plates, they have the same design than a kind of municipal plate, an official plate. Are 11 of them, and are very different cases of this interpretation of the master plan, or in the way how some of the things they're supposed to happen never happen. And I will say that this translation series bring me to work in different places in terms of using that sentence that I needed to translate. Warning, I think is, well, okay, warning, perception require involvement. This image is being, and this sentence is being translated to different situations and located in different spaces and media as a kind of leitmotif or kind of observation about if we don't get involved, we lost part of the story. You know? I think in general I say that as a claim to get involved. This sentence has many already different presentations. It has an interrelation with architecture, with the media. It was also the sentence where when I do the Spanish pavilion in Venice, I declared the pavilion of translation. Like that, it was not about a national pavilion where I myself, as a representative of Spain, I feel like I need to represent Spain, but I was bringing the idea of translation as an issue, as I feel much more interesting issues than talk about officiality and representation. Also has like the form of a sticker, billboards in different places and different situations. When I do the project in Korea, it was interesting because I was confronting the idea of translation for myself, because I need to translate the warning perception requiring involvement to Korean. And I sit with a series of people to translate, and finally it was 8 interpretations. Like that, I decided to use the 8. Because it was, I don't know who was more accurate than like the ones. And I would say that this was in Argentina. We're trying to use some of the devices they use in a public space. Before it was publicity and after political campaign. And it was in a way to try to insert or intervene in that space. I will finish here with a project that I've been doing I did in Istanbul, and in a way is a series of projects like the one I show in B-tape, Alphabil, Otros, that for different reasons, or I've been invited to participate or to explore and work in a situation to produce a work for a public work. For me, public, it could be something that happened in the street, but also happened in television, maybe internet. In this case, it's supposed to be a film for television. The result is on translation ASIC radio. I spent 2 hours, sorry, 2 years to produce that work. The first year it was totally, I was invest myself on exploring the city. I visit Istanbul sometimes, but you know, full year, pretty much several trips to understand and to talk. And I used the interviews as a system of inquiry and also to understand some of the issues through people working in the university, people working in radio, people working in different levels, social matters. And of the end, I found that the person that directed that radio, Attic Radio, a small radio, alternative radio, where it's interesting that a radio like this one existing still in Istanbul, because they are very critical with the situation. They have very opinionated, and they are still keeping going. It's a volunteer project. Nobody get paid. Everybody is working voluntarily. And it's a very interesting platform and window in Istanbul. Like that, I decided to work with them and for them. In a way, the film is about explaining the radio, how they work, but also we created 4 radio programs each program of the radio was broadcast, one about myth in Istanbul, another about stereotypes in Istanbul. I mean, the idea of Istanbul, I think, is part of the construction of Istanbul is very much a stereotype for outsiders. Then the culture industry, and then censorship. And the result of these 4 radio programs I also filmed, and it was part of the final film that I got to show a little bit of the image, I think 2 minutes, and we could finish the session. The film is 40 minutes, is divided in 4 parts, as I said before, and I will show the last part because I feel like it was like not to show the 40 minutes. I wanted to finish with that because in a way show very much how I've been working lately in terms of projects that take some time and maybe are connected to a specific place. My intention is not to go fast and arrive and react, but to try to understand and bringing maybe a fragment to what this reality, obviously from my subjective view. In this case, it was a very, very interesting experience because they appropriate totally the film, and they are using there for themselves to represent ASIC radio, like that in a constant presentation from their own. I think in this project, the more important is once the people where you work with and for appropriate themselves the work. And I think if you go from here, I think you could suppose.
Benim iyimserliğim internetle ilgili birinci olarak şuradan geliyor. Yani tamam, bu bir teknoloji. Teknolojiyi nasıl kullanacağınız her şeyi belirliyor. Fakat ilk defa bence egemen üretim ve dağıtım pratiklerini sarsacak bir teknoloji var elimizde. Dolayısıyla evet, sansür var. Türkiye'de iktidar ve hani dünyanın her yerinde farklı düzeylerde de olsa bunu kontrol etmek için çabalıyorlar. Fakat sansürün etrafından dolaşmak hiç bu kadar kolay olmamıştı. Yani biliyorsunuz, Başbakan da YouTube'a girdiğini söyledi.
Evet.
Bütün bunlarla mücadele etmenin bir internet politikası, özgürlükçü bir internet politikası belirlemek için mücadele etmenin çok önemli olduğunu düşünüyorum. Fakat bu sansür meselesi konusunda çok endişeli değilim. Hani cezalandırma meselesi benim daha çok canım sıkıyor.
Bir taraftan bu merkeziyetçi yapının kırılması bizi Muntadas'ın projesindeki başka bir alana doğru da ilerletiyor. O da kent imajının filtresi olarak medya ve kentteki çok farklı kesimlerin temsiliyet alanı olarak medya konusu. İnternet bu anlamda da çok ilginç bir perspektif açıyor. Çünkü hepimiz biliyoruz ki geleneksel medyada özellikle dezavantajlı kesimler, yani kentsel ölçekte olsun, bölgesel ölçekte olsun, ulusal ölçekte olsun, yeterince temsil edilemiyorlar. Ele alınış biçimleri de daha çok işte reyting getirecek, ilgi çekecek, oldukça kurgusal ve manipülatif bir tarz.
Biz haberlerimizin büyük bir kısmını internet üzerindeki dolaşan bilgiden toparlıyoruz. Dolayısıyla orada bence önemli bir alan var. Bu yurttaş gazeteciliğini önemseyecek ve bunu teşvik edecek bir politika bizi hakikaten demokratikleşme konusunda da, ifade özgürlüğü konusunda da önemli bir yere götürebilir.
Okay. Well, I think it's enough from my side. I don't know how this is the mechanism that if it's some comments or something like that, you know, but I feel that we are in family here. No? But that I will say I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Melanie.
Well, we're very happy to have you here. I could ask a question that's really about, the boardroom and how you felt the installation worked at the power plant, just because I'm curious about the kind of influence that the architectural spaces have on installation. It seems like always the architecture that you're working within, whether it's the existing architecture or the architecture you've created, is really important. So.
Well, I try to, when I come for the V-tape, I come to see the power plant, and I don't recognize the space. Like that, I feel it's the transformation of the space. I was looking to see. It's interesting that sometimes we talk about 200 years or 300 years, but 25 years, a space it could change a lot. Mm-hmm. Like that, physically, I don't recall. It was 3 works. It was Geneviève Cadieux and Jana Sterbak. It was a show put together, Igor, and it was 3 different with 3 different publications, but in a way it felt like it was some connection. Mm-hmm. And I will say that I think there was the 3 works. Sometimes what they tell you, well, it's 3 people, 1 is a lot. I think the situation is much more. But 3 people different, I was wondering, what is the relationship? Finally, after I see them, from the perspective of the curator, has some relationships. You know. And it's one of the works that it don't change much. Normally I do works that change. Like I say, Stadium, from the first time in Banff, the 15 times it changed very much the ways how the space transform, and it has a structure, but the software changed. In the boardroom is the only, I will say, the same way that I say the bank is one of the works done as a single image. The boardroom also is an installation that is pretty much done, is what it is, and it don't change, you know. Especially now that it's been transformed with this upgrade with the digital part. And I will say that it's been showing in other places, and at that time, I think it was 1 year after I did the work like that, I was very connected with the work. And I think Canada was also could understand these issues because the spectrum of religion and media through the American television or the issues are similar. I don't think that work, for example, it could be so well understanding in other parts of the world, you know, even it's been showing, but because it was the 12 leaders, it was in the spectrum of North America, Canada, United States. Yeah.
Antoni, when you talked about between the frames, you said that some of the analysis that you undertook at that time, that you're dealing with the implications of that now. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about that a little more.
About between the frames and?
Between the frames, yeah.
And?
You said that some of the analysis that you undertook in that piece, that now we're dealing with the implications of that.
Yeah, no, of course. And if I was needed to do, or wanted to do, I needed to put all the chapters. Biennials, auctions, fairs. It's a lot of structures that are being adding to the between. But what I will say then, the economical implication of the 80s, I think is what we see now, what the market situation is. I think it starts, I am not an art historian. I am not, and I don't want to be. And we could see maybe in other periods of history where the economy of art, it was also functioning in, the mecenes, the people. I mean, but what happened in the 80s, I think it was clearly the overpower of certain roles. And since then, these roles are switching. And the economical aspect of the market that I think brings in a situation totally over. And I think the project was trying to at the moment, you talk with the curators or you talk with the collectors, these things, in a way, it's for that I say it's a kind of precedent for on translation, because again, it's about interpretation. If you ask a critic, I mean, the chapter of the critic, everyone, it was described in a different way. One is say, I am a writer, I'm a sociologist, I'm an art historian, I am Baudelaire, I am, a poet, I am, like that. The roles that we could define critic is a very, very subjective, in a way. It's how everybody, it's not such thing that we could generalize. Same thing with the collectors. They have other reasons to collect. But I think the economical aspect is a kind of subtext in the system that is there, no? And I don't think for the artists, till the 80s, this thing it was so, not, I want to say important, I think enough to live and to keep it going. But I think at a certain moment that it created a spectacle and a kind of explosion that I think it has to do with what we live now. No? If people disagree. Okay. You are very far.
I was just wondering about
I need a translator.
I was just wondering about one of your titles, the media landscape, and whether you would still use that metaphor in terms of media and the explosion of media, or do you see that with a different metaphor?
Well, I think if we put the translation and the media together, I think it's one way of translation is the aspect of the media. We receive a lot of the reality filtered and translated by the media. Like that, I will say that it's about how conscious, unconscious. It seems like now it's very obvious to talk about how media, you could distort reality and how media filter, but I think it's sometimes still, I want to describe something that I shouldn't say because it's a kind of a personal thing, but I was on a TV channel station in New York to talk for a project. I've been working political advertisement. I collecting advertising for the political campaigns, and now we are preparing with my partner Marshall Rees the 2012 elections. And I was negotiating the use of some of these ads, etc. And then I see the window, like the glass from the studio there. If I was there, I could see the plateau. And the plateau, it was some anchor woman and anchor man with the maps of Iran and kind of rehearsal the news. Like that, I was terrified. I say, well, what is going on here? It could happen the war in any moment. If the media already are treating and dealing with that, it's a kind of precedent. And of course, the pressures in New York or in the United States are very strong by, certain communities. Then, anyway, I just want to say that in general, the general public, they don't know about that. But something is cooking there. And when it happened, it's already been the result of many, many, many months of. And what is going to happen when the political situation before or after elections or whatever is the moment they decide to do it. Just an example that I think that in a way is a lot of invisible aspects of the things that we see only. It's like iceberg. We see one part of the iceberg, but it's a lot of things we don't see it. Even we could read the newspaper, read it between the lines, and that is still a lot of things there. Like that, I think is a territory interesting, I mean, curious, sometimes perverse, to keep an eye, you know. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and yeah.
Thank you.